Hey there, we're the Westlaw Pirates and welcome to the show. We're here to share our thoughts on Northwestern athletics and college sports with thoughts and analysis from the visceral to the statistical. We run our tailgate with the red pirate flag flying high above as we give no quarter, especially the fourth. I'm Sam Walter.
I'm John Lacombe.
And I'm Eric Scouspo.
We've got a incredible guest coming up here in just a little bit. Kevin Fishbain from The Athletic is going to come on, talk about a whole bunch of things, including his awesome podcast, Breaking In with Kevin Fishbain. Looking forward to having him on in just a little bit. But it is draft week. We haven't had a chance to promote. We're getting set for our annual live draft video pod with Gary Seegers and Chris Giannini. Always unhinged, always fun. That's coming up on Thursday. And
This is going to be a jam-packed pod for all of you diehard Northwestern fans. This is just going to be you guys are going to it's going to be catnip. You're going to love every second of this, especially with it being draft week. We do feel guilty though, because at the expense of these amazing conversations we're going to have, this is going to be a lighter week relative to the spring sports discussions, which doesn't jive particularly well with Northwestern lacrosse winning an outright regular season Big Ten title
and knocking off number one again.
Right, and knocking off number one Maryland again. I mean, just phenomenal. We will have plenty of time to talk about this, like post-draft. We're going to get into all of this. Obviously, the giant postseason run is on deck for this incredible team, but I mean, they add another trophy, an incredible run. We talked about with Coach Monty Hiller particularly. I mean, what more can you say about the most legendary lacrosse coach, to ever live? But this particular year, for this team to think of where they were but a couple weeks ago with that horrible weekend of the Syracuse and Ohio State games, and to have turned it around so much so that, I mean, this is a team getting number one votes right now. I don't think they're the number one overall team.
I think they're number two right now.
They're number two, stealing votes from North Carolina, a North Carolina team that they beat in North Carolina. So, I mean, for this team to have gone to 11 and to come all the way back up and be, certainly from our view, the best lacrosse team in the land right now, it's amazing. And we will talk about it all plenty more down the road. And then the one other thing, just quickly, is not to take any shine off of softball. Marina Mason continues her ascendance.
Yeah.
We put up something. This is the single breakout star for Northwestern athletics at this moment in time. It is unreal that there is a pitcher on the mound wearing Danielle Williams' number, throwing with the opposite hand as Danielle Williams, but with that same just unbelievable changeup and the things that she's doing right now. Statistically, first-year pitchers in the country, there ain't but two better, and they're both at Alabama. And one of them's pitched half the innings that Marina Mason has. This is the latest truly special Northwestern pitcher. And catching the balls at the other end is Emma Ray, who is the Big Ten's best catcher, hands down, right now. And one of the best catchers in the country. She is absolutely hitting the cover off of the ball. One of my all-time favorite just Northwestern athletes, Northwestern people. Emma Ray, I like everything about her is fantastic, but she's unmatched right now. So again, Lax, softball, we see you. You're killing it. But it's draft week, and we're about to go down some fantastic roads.
We are so excited tonight to be joined by senior writer for The Athletic covering the Chicago Bears, Kevin Fishbain. Thank you for taking the time. Full disclosure, we wanted to have you on back during the season, and due to illness and due to just the gut punchingest of gut punches lost to Michigan, we had to circle back. But now I think leading up to the NFL draft, there's a lot of Northwestern kind of connections going on there. So thank you for coming on. Very excited to have you on.
Yeah, thank you guys for having me. And I will say, I'm very fortunate through my job. I get to do a lot of podcasts, and I think this is the only podcast I've ever asked to be on, because I have a lot of respect for the three of you. I'm a nuts Northwestern fan. I have respect what you guys do for the program, and I'm glad that it's able to work out.
Well, hey, as we've been talking about, as we'll get into in a second, You've shared a podcast space with Dave Revson, Joe Buck, James Brown, Jeff Pearlman, Mina Kimes, Mike Tirico, all to prepare you for this moment right here with the Westlot Pirates. It was all leading up to this.
Pretty much, yes. We're gonna have breaking in how the Westlot Pirates. We should do the origin story of the Westlot Pirates. Maybe if you guys what you just celebrated your 15. What was the anniversary you guys just had?
15, yeah. We
No,
15? Or
well,
6?
oh yeah.
starting
The
our
start,
six-
we're in
yeah.
the start of year 16, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
we
So
the whole thing started at Scuzz's wedding. We're sitting outside in the reception. I'd been wanting to start a podcast and like, hey guys, let's do this. There's no one else doing Northwestern podcasts. I mean, Jay was doing Lake the Posts, and that was kind of it as far as Northwestern coverage. And my thought was, hey, if no one else is going to do it, why not us?
Yeah.
They say that the majority of new businesses fail. I wonder what percentage of hey, you guys, we've had a few beers, let's start a podcast, actually resulted in a podcast.
I mean, I think we know from experience that there's been, and we've watched every other podcast in this space. Like, there's a reason why we're the only ones. We're number, but speaking of pods, like like one of the big things we wanted to talk about with you is breaking in. There are any number of ways to get at it. It's so impressive. We mentioned some of the guests. You've got, as of right now, as of us recording this, you have 54 episodes up, one for every point Northwestern scored against the Michigan Wolverines in 2000. But the list of guests just goes on. And one of the things I want to get into in a little bit is just this pod as a resource, a professional resource, or a resource for any young person who's wanting to get into journalism. But where did you get the idea to start a pod that takes some of the greatest minds in broadcasting and journalism and has them talk about, what got them into this?
Yeah, I should do the plug. It's Breaking In with Kevin Fishbain. Get it on your podcast platforms and on YouTube. And 2007, I was at WNUR, as you guys were, and we did like the first ever WNUR podcast, but we didn't know what that meant. So like my college roommate, who's one of my best friends, grooms at my wedding, everything, like he was our podcast director. And what he would do is he would just call, really like the first one I think was Darnell Autry. He like got a hold of Darnell Autry, interviewed him and just put it on, and just posted it. Just like a 10-minute interview with Darnell Autry and called it a podcast, which actually wasn't that far away from what podcasts kind of have become. And so, and then I'll fast forward a few years. My first year out of college, one of my WNR buddies, we started a podcast out of our apartment called Hang 10 with Fish, who was my nickname in college, and his nickname was Gotti, Andrew Godhelf, who did play for a bunch of big Northwestern games in our career. And we wanted to be the first like Big Ten specific podcast, and did it out of our apartment. We had Teddy Greenstein on and Dave Revson and Adam Rittenberg. And then fast forward a long time, and then I'm like, all right, I cover the Bears for a living. Now, keep in mind, guys, this was April 2024 or 2025 when I started this. I just finished my 13th season covering the Bears, in which I'd only been to one playoff game.
I was going to say that was a dark period.
Yeah.
Yes, and I just was like, I need something to get my creative juices going, and because we already had a Bears podcast at The Athletic, I was like, I love sports media. I love origin stories. I'm sure you guys are big sports media fans. I'm sure you listen to a bunch of the sports media pods.
Oh, yeah.
And I always specifically liked the origin story elements of those. So I wanted, I had the Dave Revson episode, and obviously know Dave's story from ESPN. Like we all knew what he was at ESPN News, but I had no idea about the year in Dublin he spent after college. I didn't know about that he went and worked for Chase Bank, and then he worked at a TV station in Texas. I don't know any of that stuff. Adam Rittenberg, who I know is a friend of the pod, he's become a really close friend of mine, and I've known him so well. I had no idea about some of the early things he did. So it's been really fun for me with people I already know to tell their stories, but also people who I just respect. I had Pat Hughes on a couple weeks ago, just the legendary voice of the Cubs, and just to hear him talk about what it was like calling San Jose State baseball in the late 70s. It's just been really, really fun for me. So I've had, for Northwestern purposes, I've had Rittenberg, Revson, J.A. Adonde, and Mark Lazarus, my colleague at The Athletic. Laz, by the way, I don't know if you got, he's a diehard Cats fan.
Oh, yeah.
Huge Cats fan. And I always get asked about like White Whale, Mount Rushmore. Greeny and Wilbon are definitely on that. Like I'm hopeful that down the line I can use that Mendel Mafia to get those guys on. But that's kind of the impetus of the pod, and that's why it's been and so fun to do.
So you're saying you started the pod and then the Bears went to the playoffs?
Yeah. So that was they did, and I remember like the nice thing about the pod being evergreen is I can record them like well in advance.
Yeah.
Like that Pat Hughes episode from 2 weeks ago, I recorded that in January with him. So I was able to like pretty much keep up throughout the Bears season, which is important because it's obviously really busy. And then for this season to go 2 extra weeks, which I did not plan for, so it was a little interesting where it'd be like, the Bears just had this crazy win, and then I'm tweeting, oh, and by the way, here's my podcast with, so-and-so. It might have nothing to do with the Bears, but obviously I have a lot of Chicago-centric people that I mix in there, and a lot of NFL people. So, the creative juices were definitely at an all-time high last fall and winter.
I was just going to say, that's really fun, Kevin. And, I mean, you made the comment, like, the origin stories are so compelling, especially for these personalities that we've all known and watched for so long. I'm curious. You alluded to some things, but what are a couple of just like the most amazing pieces of lore or story or origin that you've heard through the course of your work on the podcast over the last 2 years?
So the first episode I did was Joe Davis, and that was not cheating per se, but like Joe and I interned together in 2009. Actually, I will tie into WNR again. Joe and I were in the Schaumburg Flyers booth. I never met him. I just joined as an intern, and he's the play-by-play guy. I was like the number 3 that summer. And Joe came and visited me at Northwestern. And he went to Beloit, where they didn't really have much like radio-wise. He kind of did everything himself. And I brought him to the new WR studios, which were about 2-3 years old then. And he was just like blown away. Like, you guys actually have you could do this. You have a station. So I knew Joe's story intimately, which includes him handwriting a letter to Len Casper when he was like 22, bringing it with him to a Cubs game and losing the letter on his way in. A Taco Bell employee finding the letter, delivering it to Wrigley Field that got to Len, who reached out to Joe, and the two of them established this connection. Len put in a good word. So that was episode 1, so I felt like that was a good start.
Wait,
Adam
the Taco Bell that used to be across the street from
the infamous the infamous Taco Bell. Yeah.
I can't believe anything came out of there that wasn't food.
My Big Ten podcast I mentioned, we recorded out of an apartment at Addison and Racine, so I knew that Taco Bell probably a little too well. Adam Amin was a fantastic guest, and he was really open about the struggles he went through. His first job was in the middle of nowhere, Iowa, just like working at a radio station, working all hours, where he did like the morning show, afternoon sports updates, and then would do high school basketball in this just nothing town in Iowa, just waiting to get a break with minor league baseball. I thought that was really cool to kind of hear him open up in that way. If you're for the Chicago sports people, Mark Potash was a lot of fun. Chicago Sun-Times writer for like 30 years. He was just full of, but he started in Arkansas, and I actually did re-record with him because we finished recording, and he goes, wow, that was really fun. I didn't even tell you about the time I was working in Arkansas and I left Scottie Pippen off my all-area team. And I'm like, hold it. I'm like, hit record again. I'm like, start over with that story. So Potsy was a lot of fun. I don't know if you guys are like hockey fans or anything. Bruce Arthur. No, you don't even have to be a hockey fan to like Bruce Arthur. I mean, I love him as a writer.
No, that's such a loaded question to ask us because I'm not, and the other two are massive hockey guys.
Oh yeah,
Kevin, literally, there's a hockey game happening right there, like in my side view.
My middle son is 3, and for whatever reason, become obsessed with hockey. So I have been paying more attention than usual. But Bruce Arthur was really just like, again, these people just. It's been really fun to see people open up. I mean, shoot, Joe Buck like told me about how he cried when he read an article that was ripping him after he was about to join the booth with his dad. So those are some of the top things that have come to mind as like some of my favorite little anecdotes that have come out of this.
I was going to say, you talked earlier about the evergreen nature of this podcast, and it's one of the things that has really struck me as I've been going through it all is that, yeah, the episodes are numbered, but like you were saying, this is all kind of timeless, and it's so easy for someone to dive in because you can approach it kind of how I approached it, which is basically like, well, of all the people on this list, who are like the first people, it's like being in a candy store. It's being like, well, who are my personal favorites, who I want to grab, what kind of anecdotes. I was saying one of the first ones I went to was Jeff Pearlman, just because I knew what a live wire he is and what interesting. And I found it so great because he told a story that to me encapsulated, and I feel like this is kind of the cross between like the entertainment, but almost like an inspirational / educational for like a younger person who might be looking at something like this. But he tells this anecdote about writing a story for his school paper about how cheerleading's not a real sport, and then getting confronted in the cafeteria by the entire cheerleading squad all being up in his face. But the context is he's talking about how great it was from his perspective, and I was like, everything you need to know about Jeff Pearlman is contained within that story right there. And it's just so funny because I was like, you could just kind of almost like map it out and be like, the DNA from this person is apparent right here, and someone who's willing to write a story. And of course he went on to write some of the most famously polarizing and lightning rod stories, but then stand behind it and stand physically. And I was like, what a perfect anecdote. I'm kind of curious, so I guess sort of along those lines, but have there been any like through lines or themes where you've done enough of these now where you can see, like that there's at some point, like there's kind of this beat, or there's kind of like this lesson, or there's this moment, or like, something that, like, I don't know, like a central theme or a lesson that you've pulled out of these en masse?
Yeah, a lot of it is just people shooting their shot. And, it's the whole, and actually Jeff Pearlman talked about this a lot, like the being comfortable, being uncomfortable. And it's actually been like helpful to me in my work. Like covering the Bears is super competitive, and sometimes you just have to feel comfortable, like walking in, marching over to a player's locker, even if he's not going to be happy, whatever's going on. Like I just have to, like, I know I have to be better at some of those things. And it's been fun to hear these people like tell these stories about like this just kind of big moment when they decided to like just do it, just send that resume, just create that podcast. Just I was thinking of Courtney Cronin, who I'm with every day at Hallis Hall, just phenomenal work for ESPN. She talked about sending a video reel of her when she was in Indiana doing a highlight reel in Spanish. And she's like, whatever, I'll just like send it in. And like the people at the Clarion Ledger in Mississippi were so impressed. And that's how she got her first job, Jackson, Mississippi, which led to her next job, which led to, the Vikings, gig she had in Minnesota before coming here. And now she's, I always joke with her, she's on a rocket ship. So I think that like that through line, which I always ask people about at the end of the episode, a lot of it is shooting your shot. And then for you guys, I'm sure, like, especially the WR connection, like, every broadcaster, it's preparation. It's like every one of them talks about like that they prepare for even the greatest ones to do it, prepare for games now the same way they did, when they start. Like Adam Amina, like I love when he shows his charts, and I think back to like when I found actually recently I was looking through something in Gmail, and I found Northwestern Purdue basketball from January 2010, and I had my spot sheet or my chart for that game because I called that game a win over number 6 Purdue. By the way, Drew Crawford, that was a big game for him.
Oh yeah,
and it's cool to hear that like the literal Hall of Famers still prepare the same exact way that they did 30, 40 years ago when they were trying to break in.
You always ask if people were to ask your guests for advice, what would they give? And has there been sort of a common story that they are giving out to the up and coming journalists of the world?
It's funny, Sam, because you can get their like glass half full versus half empty about the industry.
Right.
Like some people are just kind of like, I don't even know what I would say at this point because it's hard. And some people are like, there's so many more opportunities. I think, it's funny because, so, you know, John, you mentioned Jeff Pearlman, and like I'm very open that I based the podcast a lot around his podcast. Like I totally stole the newspapers.com bit of research and some of for doing my research from him. And one of the things he's always said is start a podcast. Like just start something. And nowadays it is start a podcast or start a Substack or start a Beehive or whatever newsletter you want just to get your name out there and just get started. And like it's a I had somebody tell me that the 1985 Bears, a normal day in the locker room that year, there'd be 4 writers. And I was there today for the first day of the off-season training program, and there were probably 40 people there today. And they haven't done it. Like they literally just like Kobe Bryant, the safety from Seattle, they signed. Someone was like, "So what do you think of Chicago? This is just far." And he's like, "Yeah, I just landed last night. I had never been here before."
Wow.
So like, so and that's how many people were there today to cover that. So I bring that up to be like, there are so many. It's obviously, I hearken for some of the days that I hear about. Like you hear about what the Sports Illustrated was like in the 90s. You hear what it was like to be a sports columnist in the 80s. You hear Jay Donde talking about traveling around with the Bulls. And I'm kind of like, man, if I was born like 20 years, But the flip side of that is like there's like the Athletic never existed, right? Like the place I worked before the Athletic was kind of just this, the group of newspapers out in Northwest suburbs started. They wanted to have a digital outlet to cover the Bears, and they brought me on board. Like that wouldn't have existed. So I think the main advice to everybody is just like, you just have to start, even if it's taking your iPhone and practicing broadcasting or, starting a podcast, starting a newsletter. Like that is kind of the main thing that everybody, like the main advice everybody gives. So that's been, I'm speaking, we're talking on Monday. I'm talking to a Medill class on Wednesday. And I do this every year. I talk to Melissa Isaacson's class, the legendary former Bulls writer of the Tribune. And every year she's got like 40 people in there with a zillion questions. So it gives me hope that there's still plenty of people that want to do this. And hopefully the podcast can give them just one more resource as they get started.
Well, I ironically, if there's any space in sports that maybe still has the feel of a 4-person Bears locker room or some of the early days.
This is exactly what I was thinking.
It's Northwestern sports, and so for the young Northwestern fans that are listening either tonight or that have the privilege of listening to you on Monday in class, like go for it, y'all. Start a podcast. Holler at us. We'd love to chat and share what we know. But there is good opportunity.
Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off, Scott, but I love that you guys have had some like Daily Northwestern Inside NU writers, and you guys promote their stuff, which is awesome because like every year we just get new and new people that are doing great things. And like, I know for you guys it didn't exist. It didn't exist. Inside NU was not there when I was there. I would have loved that opportunity. I mean, I don't know what the WR Daily rivalry was like when you guys were there, but it was pretty heated during my 4 years.
Yeah.
I was just a sports columnist for 1 quarter. But I always, whenever I talk to Northwestern students, I tell them like, guys, you are at a Big Ten school that is really, really good at a bunch of sports, and the newspapers here don't cover them. The TV stations here don't cover them. You guys have a golden opportunity to be the one. Like if we'll talk about the NFL draft. Like if when Caleb Tiernan gets drafted, like the number one story that somebody might read in that market is probably going to be what someone wrote about him for the Daily or for Inside NU. Like, or, I hope somebody took advantage of it. I hope somebody wrote a profile piece of Aiden Hubbard at some point, because if the Jaguars take him in the 6th round and I'm writing for the Florida Times Union and I need to learn about this guy, there's an opportunity there. So I always remind Northwestern students, like, you guys have a bit of a gold mine here in terms of like opportunities to write and do podcasts and do video of really good teams and what has now become the best conference in America to do that stuff. And I went to a WR meeting for the first time in 16 years. a month ago. Shout out to WNOR Sports Director Ethan Siegel, who I coached in baseball when he was 9.
Oh, wow.
So that was a real wake up call to see that when he reached out to me, he was like, "Hey, I'm at Medill," and I'm like, "You need to be out there at shortstop right now. We have a game." But it was a huge crowd. Like and just seeing the number of shows they have, the number of podcasts they have, is really cool. So, but yeah, any Northwestern student listening, like, please, like, take advantage of what you've got and write profiles of these players and give them some love too, because you don't have to worry about the Tribune or Sun-Times. I mean, if you're at Ohio State, you've got tons of, Michigan State, all these different places, Michigan, like, it's a unique. Now I say all this, and I'm sure you guys with me, I wish the newspapers covered Northwestern.
Oh, yeah.
I wish we, the Athletic, covered Northwestern the way, like when Matt Fortuna was with us, the stuff that he did. And I wish we had that, but it's just, it's hard now. And that is, again, how I miss the days of yore when there would have been dedicated, Northwestern writers there.
You mentioned, like, taking that opportunity. I think, like, Kaylin Kaler, how she started.
Yep.
Like, she went to the draft in Chicago and got hooked up with Peter King, and one thing led to another, and, like, she took that upon herself to do it, and that's exactly what people should be doing. I love that.
Shout out Kaylin, she better be listening. One of my good friends too. I said to her, I was like, Kaylin, I have good news. Another white man has started a podcast, and it's about sports media. And so I've told her I'm like saving. I've told her I'll wait a while and eventually gonna, like, make her. I'm gonna. She's gotta have to wait a little bit, but she will definitely be on to tell her story because it's a good one.
Oh, that's awesome,
Kevin. Thank you for just giving us a voice. The white man we need there. Where it is funny though, like you talked about. I think like you mentioned Caleb Tiernan, but when you brought up Tiernan, it immediately made me think about the single best piece of journalism written about Preston Stone, maybe in the past 5 years, was written by Harris Horowitz this year. That's one of the best things I read in the college journalism space, was Horowitz's giant profile of Preston Stone. And it's like, we are super lucky in that way, that we get to be in a place where we get to kind of see and have our eyes and be like, oh, look at the new people coming in. And, like, and we have our favorites and et cetera, we get to see great people. I mean, Yan Lee is another one where, like, we get to see, she came in as a swim writer, but I think we're the best stick sport school in the country, and she became one of the best stick sport writers. And we love seeing stuff like that. I think I have an interesting perspective, and Sam probably feels a little bit the same way, in that we're two Medill guys who didn't go into sports journalism, aside from running this podcast and talking about, like, lessons for Medill students and current Medill students. I mean, I very much felt that when I went to Medill pretty early on, I could look around and be like, you're going to succeed, and you're going to succeed, and you're going to succeed. And maybe that's not going to be me. But it wasn't so much about, oh, because your writing is so awesome, or because, like, you have all the connections, or because, like, you know someone, or you've had this great break. It was just like, you could just feel who wanted it. You could feel the hunger. And certain people, and you'd be like, man, you've just got the fire in your belly. And it's like, to the point where it's like, if you do, I mean, like, that's the thing. It's just like, keep shooting your shot. And like I said, they can go and listen to your podcast or watch your podcast on YouTube and, see the breaking in piece of it and be like, here's how all these people shot their shots. But the common thread is that they did it. And again, it's like all these people at Medill, like, you know who you are. You've got the hunger to do it. Like, just shoot your shot.
Journalism and pre-med had a little bit more in common than I realized.
Yeah.
The passion thing is also, it comes up a lot. I'm always careful. I used to, like, give advice like, oh, do what you love. But, like, the fact of the matter is, like, you can't always do that. Like, you got, mortgages to pay and families to feed and all that stuff. And it's hard. And I'm very fortunate I get to do what I love. And actually, Ian Rappaport, when he was on my podcast, his piece of advice was like, if you love sports, get a great job and buy season tickets. If you love writing, if you love journalism, if you love reporting, then come into this. Now, I will say this. One of my favorite things about covering the Bears is I can be a rabid meathead Northwestern fan on Saturdays and just like, you know, every Saturday I'm at the game or watching the game, and gosh, the number of times like when this Bears schedule comes out, like the first thing I do is compare it to Northwestern's schedule and be like, what games can I go to? Which game? Like this year, I went to the Oregon game because I wanted to see that in person, and I just booked like the latest flight possible to get to their road game that week. Like that's how maniacal I am, and it's fun that I'm allowed to do that, right? Like if I covered college football, I couldn't be that outwardly. So for the passion piece, I'm very passionate about journalism writing. But I'll say this, John, I had a Medill class of 160. I don't know. There's 10 of us. Like it's just and again, I graduated in 2010. It was the year after the crash. Like there wasn't a whole lot going on then. But I think there are probably more people who went to Teach for America from Medill than are currently still journalists potentially. But the ones who are, it's those of us that just love the craft so much. But I do like that I can, like, my wife does give me a bit of a hard time. She's like, okay, so let me get this straight. Your busiest time of year is also the same time of year as your biggest hobby. So like you work really, really hard in the fall, and then when you have this one day off, the one day you don't have to be working, you have to be watching Northwestern football in person. And I go, and then basketball season starts, and then it's like, and it just
we always tell this joke. We always tell this joke because we used to always be like, but at least we can take off in the spring. Nope, not anymore.
Kevin, eventually your kids get sucked into it, and then it's just awesome. And if your wife's a sports fan, like double bonus, and if she's not, she gets some free time.
Well, she is a big sports fan. She went to Michigan, so But it's funny because during the Michigan Northwestern game we alluded to earlier, I had to watch that one from home. I think Bears had a road game, and there was who was the tight that I'm blanking the tight end to that huge game for the Cats.
Welsing.
Welsing,
here, right?
Welsing.
Yeah, Welsing.
I was starting to say Hedwig in my head, but Welsing.
Current Ohio State Buckeye, Hunter Welsing.
Oh, yeah. He get a big catch over the seam to set up. It was either to set up a touchdown, I would like, and my wife like cheered, and I looked at her, I'm like, you don't have to, it's fine. You don't have to do this. You don't have to like patronize, And she said to me, she goes, listen, I've been with you long enough to know this means so much to you. So much more to you than what Michigan, like she's a Michigan fan, but it's just so, but yeah, I actually will say not long before we hopped on, my middle son requires Go You Northwestern to be sung to him, at bedtime. So we're getting there.
Fantastic.
So you mean, this is kind of an interesting time of the year, as we're like a few days away from the NFL draft. This is like when college and pros get together. And it's kind of an interesting time, thinking about the NFL draft this year. You got a guy like Caleb Tiernan, who clearly was, our best offensive lineman, but not quite necessarily the first round guy that Slater or Skoronski were a couple of years ago. But like, how do you, and like, I adore what you guys at The Athletic are doing. Like, the beast is incredible. And, from a coverage side of things, how can the NFL guys get a better sense of what the college guys are going to be coming in to do?
Yeah, well, talking about mixing Northwestern and, being a Northwestern fan and covering the Bears, I do make it a point to go to Northwestern Pro Day every year for quote unquote work.
Sure.
But which it is work, because I like to network with scouts who are there. Yeah, and what that usually means is like I say hi to one scout and I watch Kalen Kaler like go up and down the sideline talking to every single scout and handing out business cards. I'm like, oh my God, that's why she's, where she is. And I like, in past years I've had great chats at Fitz at the pro days. I had a good chat with David Braun last year. And it's fun to watch these guys. I actually got to do like a fun Justin Jackson story a few years ago. So I do try to use that for work a little bit as well. But Sam, to your question, it's kind of interesting because I do like my draft research tends to just be reading Dane Brugler at this point in my career because as you guys know, as we talk about parenting with kids, it's just like I used to sit there and I would pull up YouTubes of players in the Bears range and I would sit and watch and take notes and try to get an idea. But like you have to be more efficient with your time in general. And then when I've got kids running around, so I do rely on Dane a lot. And actually, I just pulled this up. I went to ProFootballNetwork.com, which has like a free mock draft simulator, and I did the Bears Northwestern draft class. Unfortunately, there were only 6 Northwestern players in their system.
Okay.
So they took Caleb Tiernan at 25, which they gave a D minus. Aiden Hubbard went 57th at Evan Bernston, 60th. Jackson Carcella, Bears need a center, for the future. In the 3rd round, Carmine Baston, Bears need interior defensive lineman. And then I'm a believer, Ron Wolf, draft a quarterback every year. So Preston Stone at number 239. I was looking for Cam Porter to be 241 and couldn't find him. But it's funny because Dane Brugler, who actually will be my breaking in guest this week, which is fun because I think like people probably want to know like how the hell did he become a draft guru. Dane knows that every time the beast comes out, the first thing I do is do Control F Northwestern and read his scouting reports. But what's really cool this year on the website, if you click Explore, you can actually just type in Northwestern and it will just give you. I think he's got full reports on definitely Tiernan, Berenson, and Hubbard, maybe Carcelo and Stone as well. But the amount of work he puts in is crazy. So yeah, and I remember back when the draft was Saturday, Sunday, and Northwestern was a Sunday draft team, if you will, except for the Napoleon Harrises and Luis Castillos of the world. We were a Sunday draft team. I would sit on my couch all day watching the bottom line, waiting for Noah Herron's name to come up. Like I would just sit there and like that probably was what created that probably turned me into a draft fan, was like, which is ironic because it's like if you're an Alabama fan, it makes sense that you're big NFL draft fan. If you're a Michigan, but as a Northwestern fan, like I was like, I want to see where these guys are going to go. So that like fueled the love of the draft, and it's been fun getting to cover it for so long.
I'm not going to lie, I got really excited when I saw Nick Kosminder in his Broncos coverage today had Aiden Hubbard going to the Broncos at like 240 something.
Nice. Well, it's funny, Sam, before you mentioned that, I should have actually given this note to Nick. I would keep an eye on Denver for Bernston because you guys obviously know the Denver Broncos connections. They've got Austin King and Zach Streif and Lou Ayeni on staff. So there's some intimate, knowledge of the program. And I bring up Bernston because I was talking to somebody earlier today, actually, thinking about how it's going on here, and I was just like asking about a few players. I was like, I got to ask about my Northwestern guy. And one of the things they said was he's one of those people that just incredibly benefited from transferring, like from an NFL perspective. It was just like the total example, poster child of, yeah, you were really good in this level, but you come to Northwestern, you have this great year, you can play 2 positions. And he's somebody that, you guys were all over when he got here, but maybe to the layman Northwestern fans, like, okay, we got a good guard, and now you're talking about him being, maybe a 5th, 6th round draft pick.
So is it simply the exposure and the competition level in the Big Ten that facilitates that?
Yeah, I think so. You get another year under your belt, and then it's like, okay, I can watch you against Michigan's defensive line.
Yeah.
I can watch you against Oregon's defensive line. And that is easier for me to make a projection than when you're in the Dakotas. And it's so hard for those guys. When you talk to scouts about the guys who are in FCS, like the margin of error is so slim. Like you have to dominate, just absolutely dominate your competition like at all times. And there's a little bit of leeway, obviously, when you're in the Big Ten because you're playing first round, second round picks every week. So I think, just getting to be able to have that tape where you're playing the best and they can say, okay, if you can play well against this guy, I can feel good when the Colts come to town next week.
It's funny because I feel like in draft coverage in years past, sometimes the picks that get the most eyeballs and attention are when a team goes off the radar. And I'm forgetting the name, but the Bears went. It was a first round pick in the 20s, and they picked a corner or a safety from a tiny school. And everybody was like, "What is happening? Oh my god!" But so much focus and tension makes you almost think that those diamonds in the rough at the small schools are something that everybody's looking for year in and year out. But it is way more intuitive what you just said about Bernstein, that coming to the Big Ten, showcasing your ability against that higher level of talent is the much more effective path to getting drafted.
And he had a good week at the Shrine Game too, which and that's like kind of that next level. Like, okay, you did in the Big Ten, now you're doing it against another level of players in front of scouts. And I know Tiernan blew up the combine, to use a cliche, in terms of some of his athletic numbers. I did have somebody at Hallis Hall today be like, so what's with Northwestern tackles and short arms? Like, why? And I said, well, the thing is, I go, look, if he had 34-inch arms, he wouldn't have gone to Northwestern probably. So, like,
as we said on Twitter, Pete Skoronsky, Caleb Tiernan, and a Tyrannosaurus Rex all have short arms in common, and they all do the same thing with their short arms. It's funny, you mentioned Alabama earlier in the context of, well, someone from an Alabama fan, and it's funny because we'll be doing our yearly Unhinged live draft show on Thursday with our Winning Cures Everything boys, Gary Seegers and Chris Giannini, and Gary's an Alabama guy, Chris is an LSU guy, and that's just their life, right? But in that context, I think one of the things that we were curious about is, I don't know, like if it's like a head versus heart kind of thing, but I mean, whatever Alabama is or whatever LSU is in a given year, that's not the Chicago Bears. Like, in other words, it's like any Northwestern guy is effectively dreaming of potentially, the dream to become the cog in the wheel that is the Chicago Bears, right? And that's the world that you live in professionally, like, every day, where it's just like, as a whole, this whole other grade and caliber of football. And I'm just kind of curious, that's the caliber of player that you are watching from a personal standpoint all year long. How does that affect your viewpoint on, where even a Caleb Tiernan, right? Like, that's a guy where potentially we hope that, depending on where he's drafted and his fit, that's an NFL starter. But I think for any other guy, and NFL starters is what you deal with all the time, and that caliber of player, that caliber of pedigree, from a Caleb Williams all the way on down. How does that affect your view on Northwestern? Like, do you still put one, but how does I guess seeing that caliber of talent on a daily basis affect your view of Northwestern football and the guys who are trying to make it in the league?
Well, there are a couple ways to answer that. One is I've watched so much football for work over the years. I think I get angrier about decision making on the coaching side of things.
Now you're talking my language, Kevin.
Like when I met David Braun for the first time, did I want to take off my journalist hat and be like, okay, listen, you're a 30 touchdown underdog at Washington. You have the ball inside the goal line. What? Like, just go for it. But so I do think that but in all seriousness, I do pay a lot more attention. I think the analytics. I think college coaches. Don't want to go into too much of a rant here, but I do think this is specific to your question a little bit, John. Like, watching the NFL and seeing how much these guys put into throwing a challenge flag or calling, I have a rule that you should never call a timeout in the second half unless it is to stop the clock. Like, that is my personal. You should never call a timeout in the third quarter. I think David Braun called 7 timeouts in the third quarter at USC. Okay, and
He can't take him with him, Kevin.
Can't take him with him. And I just like, and I remember one of them actually, like, I remember one specifically was like they really needed to call a timeout there, but like stuff like little things like that you just don't. Some NFL coaches can get away with that stuff. Others, like if it backfires, they get ethered. I do think that the college game is still catching up to the NFL in terms of some of that stuff. As far as the playing goes, I always tell people that rookie minicamp, which is like the least covered of all the stuff I cover in a given year. What I love about rookie minicamp is you will see the biggest gap in talent that you'll ever see. Because, like, for example, like last year, I guess last year's not a good one because Loveland didn't participate. The year before, here's Caleb Williams at rookie minicamp. So rookie minicamp, for those who don't know, it's the draft picks, the undrafted rookies, and then the team has to bring in about 30 guys for $500 each. I don't know if they pay their airfare, meals in a hotel room, and in a class picture essentially to be a tackling dummy for 2 days. Now they're just in shorts and jerseys, so it's not real tackling, but like they invite these 30 guys to rookie camp, and that is the literal bottom of the pecking order in football. And Victor Cruz is known as like the greatest story of somebody that went from a rookie mini camp tryout player to becoming who he was. That's how rare it is. So here you are, and here's Caleb Williams on one side throwing the football. And I remember this when Justin Fields, because Justin Fields looked phenomenal his rookie mini camp too. But again, the competition was like, so that in a weird way, John, like rookies against rookies, you see the draft picks against the tryout guys, and then you flip that the next week, you're back there for the veterans come in, and then you see where the rookies are again. So it does emphasize how hard it is to get to that level. And, it's so funny too, because I know there's always this basketball argument, like between watching the NBA versus watching college basketball. I'll always take college basketball. I love watching college basketball. But for football, I feel like you don't hear the argument as much because college football is just so popular. It certainly doesn't take anything away from me, like watching Northwestern. Like, as I said, I get a little annoyed because sometimes this is maybe a bad comparison. Like, I'm at my kid's 5-year-old T-ball practice, and you're like, just catch the ball. Like, they're 5. Sometimes you're in a Northwestern game, and you're like, just do this. You're like, okay, this is a low middle tier Big Ten team, and I'm spending my Sundays watching the NFL. So it's a little different, but it's still really high level football, and I still love being able to watch it.
This for us, I think, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about more of this on the draft show, but I think this is an interesting draft for us in terms of there's a group of guys who are hoping to be drafted in the second half of this draft that I think not only have we kind of been able to get to know their families a little bit, but it's, if anyone who's listening, I mean, it's like we're preaching to the choir here. You're all listening to this podcast. But if you do the math on the time, these are families that came into the Northwestern sphere right during not only, just post-COVID, but all of the unpleasantness and all the craziness and everything that happened, and just what everyone who was in that blender, and we can include all of us in Northwestern Nation in the same thing, like what they all went through at the same time. But now, when we look at like Carmine Bastone, Jackson Carcello, or a Josh Thompson who played his last year at LSU, but kind of the same thing. Like, it's very much like this is one year particularly for us where I'm sure, and I'm sure it kind of echoes some of the stuff you're saying of like the professional and everything, and then viewing it as just a Northwestern fan, where we're like, there's all the X's and O's, and there's all the top of the draft, and there's Caleb Tiernan's combine tape and combine performance and all that thing. And then, on the second half, there are all these guys where I'm just like, I just know his dad's going to be sitting in front of the TV watching the draft, and I would give anything for the guys to hear their names get called, and it's like, it's a lot of things crashing into each other. But it's an exciting thing. One thing we were curious about, just relative to, I guess, to kind of give people from the Bears' perspective a little bit of insight of just like, what's your week look like this week relative to the draft? Like, what's your kind of calendar? How does this play out in, a standard year as this builds up to the draft? Like, what you're doing running up to the draft and then immediately after it, how does it go for you?
Yeah, well, thankfully I just had to do one final mock draft, which I love doing mock drafts because to me it's an exercise in getting to know these guys. Like I told you guys, like I just can't watch tape of these players. I do feel I have a little bit of an advantage because I do watch so much college football, and there are a bunch of NFL writers who just aren't big college football fans. And I watch so much of it, so much Big Ten, so like I do feel like that helps me a little bit.
Were you like Vegas trading out of one? They know they can get Caleb Tiernan at 5.
Yeah, yeah.
Kevin, how deep do you go? How deep does your mock go?
I just do the Bears, so it's just a Bears.
Oh, gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
just do the Bears.
Sorry, so I just do a Bears mock draft. Now I will go 7 rounds. But the problem, like for example, Bernstein, like they don't have a pick between the 4th and the 7th. And I like to stick to Dane Brugler's board, and he gives him a 5th to 6th round grade. So I couldn't find like a good spot for him. That doesn't mean the Bears won't mortgage the future to draft him in round 5. But
propose a trade, man. Come on.
You do. Yeah.
Yeah. Will I cheer in the press? And no cheering in the press box. Will I give a little fist pump? I did look at the Bears put out a bit of a draft guide today. Corey Wooten is the last Bears draft pick from Northwestern. It's been that long. Wow. But which kind of surprised me when I saw it. But for the week, mock drafts are finally done. It's funny, the Bears actually have like a bunch of, like I mentioned today, they opened up offseason training, so we were there hearing from Caleb Williams and Cole Kmet. Tuesday is their annual Piccolo Awards ceremony for those of you who are fans of the movie Brian Song. It's the day to honor Brian Piccolo and give out that award. And then we get the most useless press conference of the entire year is the pre-draft presser with the general manager and assistant GM. And it's so funny because these guys are like, I can't tell you anything, but we have to do this thing. And then I joked Thursday is like a weirdly relaxing day because there's just nothing going on. There's nothing to do until, I will say, 5 years or 6 years ago, 2021, 5 years ago, I remember walking one of my kids in a stroller in the afternoon and getting a text from a scout who was like, keep an eye on the Bears and Justin Fields. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, I'd always like had him as an option, but that kind of like raised my eyebrows like, whoa, I might have a busier night. And I certainly did. So Thursday ends. It's weird. It's this weird calm, and it's like, okay, then you're watching that. You're at Hal. I always joke. I've never been to the draft, even when it was in Chicago. I didn't go because there's nothing for me really to do there. The GM, and coach talk at Hallis Hall, and the pick is made, and then suddenly like you black out for like 3 hours. Like I'm glad the Bears picking 25. I promise you, I will the next morning find out who was picked 26 to 32. Like because you're just feverishly writing, and in these days it's a podcast, it's a video, it's like it's tweeting or what? Do we have a verb yet for Blue Sky posting? I'm a big Blue Sky guy, but we haven't found a good verb for it.
No.
We
can workshop that. Yeah.
Yeah. So and then and same thing, and then Friday's a longer day because the first round pick comes and does a press conference, and then you have Friday, and then Saturday is just kind of all day. So and then it doesn't end because then Sunday's undrafted rookies signing. So yeah, I love draft week, and this will be, I guess, let me do my math here. This will be my 13th draft I cover with the Bears and my 16th overall since I started covering the NFL, which is pretty fun. I love the draft. It's a crazy hectic weekend. Luckily there's enough time between the Bears picking 129 and 239 that I think I can go to a T-ball game in the afternoon is the goal, and then head back to Hallis Hall. But it's fun. And just like we sit at our desks and we have NFL Network or ESPN just on, and we watch and we opine, and we just hang out with our colleagues in the press room, just like just watch you with your friends at home.
It's interesting to me that even in the days when or maybe it was too long ago, but like I feel like pre-COVID weren't at one point like all the GMs were on the floor, right? And like you had to walk your card up. And I distinctly remember this because as the resident Vikings fan on this podcast,
I knew where this was going.
I still remember the year where we didn't get the card in. And then the next year we were 2 picks late with the card. I don't know how that happens. Anyways, I guess this is what happens when you make the offensive line coach the head coach to devalue the value of the team, so you can, or to reduce your payroll. I can't remember what happened. Anyways, it was I blacked out. But so even in those years, you didn't, or maybe that predated your time with the team.
No, I remember though. I don't know when the GM stopped going. I remember like the Bears used to have a representative who would be that person to do the to do kind of the but yeah, to do like
You'd
kind of
still
the
want the
perfunctory
war room,
phone
right?
call. Yeah, but now like as long as I've been covering, we get and the annoying thing about that for the years the Bears have picked like top 10 is the GM will usually not talk to us until the first round's done.
Wow.
So like the pick will be made at 7:30. I'm done writing by 9:30, and then they're like, oh yeah, the GM will be down at 11 because just in case, what if he wants to trade? You have to sit there and like I'm trying There were a couple of drafts I covered where they didn't have a first round pick, and I think I still went in. I think I still went to Hallis Hall, sat there, had pizza, watched the draft just to make sure they didn't trade up. They didn't trade up, and I drove back home.
Well, that's going to be my night on Thursday as a Bronco fan.
That's right.
I was going to say the other thing that occurred to me as you were talking through kind of like your weekend schedule, Kevin, you alluded to the most useless press conference of the year do you ever go back and look at that press conference in arrears and look for hints? And I'm specifically thinking about the Mitch Trubisky year. Was there anything in that conversation that would have foretold something insane was going to happen?
So two answers to that. The first one is the one I always remember was Phil Emery, former Bears GM, and boy, was I looking at some of his drafts today, and he gave his presser, but in the pretty different. He essentially said that he had done the research and decided like there was no point in drafting a developmental quarterback like in the late. Like there was no point. Like either draft the quarterback to be your starter in rounds 1 or 2, and otherwise, like because the hit rate for quarterbacks on day 3 is just nothing. And then 3 days later, they drafted David Fales in the 6th round, and he was like, "Well, here's what I mean by that." And you kind of understood what he meant by it. Like you got it. He's like, "Yeah, this guy's just going to develop into being a backup, and we'll see." We'll see. The Mitch Trubisky year, I knew they liked him. I had some intel that like I knew they liked him, but that's all I mean, it was nothing like but I do remember that the day before I actually spoke at my high school, and they were asking me and I was explaining the process, and that back then I used to pre-write. So especially when the Bears had a high pick. So I had 10 stories written that day.
Oh, no.
And like one of them, the Bears have drafted Jamal Adams and the Bears have drafted Deshaun Watson. And the last one I did, because I got kind of some late intel, like, hey, by the way, like the Bears do like him. That's all I knew. I was like, all right, fine. The last one I did was I pre-wrote the Bears have drafted Mitch Trubisky. But wow. even still, I just like, it was that night was insane.
The next day you should have been like, you know what? As protest, I'm submitting one of these other 9 stories instead. We're gonna pretend they took him.
Yeah. Oh boy, we got a story coming out Tuesday where my coworker Dan Weir and I we graded the 2022 draft, and we're gonna start grading each draft like 4 years later, awesome. Which is kind of like the end of the rookie contracts. And we did go back and do some Bears spreadsheets and kind of look at, and we got into a bit of a debate over like, how do you grade the Mitch Trubisky pick? Because on the one hand, massive failure of a pick considering where he was drafted, who was drafted after him. And then I did needle my coworker. I'm like, they went to the playoffs twice with Mitch Trubisky as their quarterback. Now I know that like he was not certainly the catalyst of those playoffs, because then he goes, you watched every game of those Mitch Trubisky seasons, right? I go, he went to the Pro Bowl in 2018. So it's like a weird, like, I always try to be a little careful because it was like, but it's
Super Bowl quarterback Rex Grossman. Yeah, it's the same.
It is very wild to look back at some of these drafts in hindsight, and you find guys that like, who in the moment, like on Saturday, I will be feverishly reading a Dane Brugler scouting report about whoever the Bears take. And like 4 years from now, I might look at that name in Pro Football Reference and be like, who? and see that like he never appeared in a game, you know. So it's that's the fun of the draft. Or they could take a Kyle Manung guy in the 7th round and then look what he did in his rookie year.
So I want to move on and talk to you a little bit about like like I said earlier, we were going to have you on to talk about Michigan leading up to the Michigan game at Wrigley, being that it was the 25th anniversary of the 54-51 game in 2000, and you wrote an incredible oral history of that game. And, you know, I back then we really wanted to focus on that, but I think now I do want to revisit that a little bit and kind of go over how do you do an oral history like that? I mean, I'm always just so impressed by any massive oral history like that. And how does that come together?
Another shout out to our friend Kaylin Kaler, who hates oral histories, and I think to this day maybe has refused to read that one out of protest of the writing style of an oral history. You know, so I was 13. I was at the game. You know, to give a little background, my dad graduated in 76. I started going to Western games regularly when I was 7. And I've been going, you know, so it's been over 30 years. And the 2000 team for me, I mean, if you guys, I don't know how you guys are. I always think of peak sports fandom tends to be when you're like 12, 13, 14. And like, so for...
This is a specific thing we wanted to talk about with you, just because if you do the math between our ages, I think less for Sam, but for Scuzz and I, that's sort of how the Rose Bowl season was for us. We were like 15-ish, like for that. So yeah.
But that was candidly, that was not on my radar. But go ahead, we can circle back to that.
Yeah, well, so for me, like, I mean, that was the early years of ESPN.com started having little highlights in a tiny video module, and I used to sit and replay the Hail Mary to Sam Simmons. I'd replay Damien Anderson's run in the Wisconsin game. I'd replay the 54-51. This is before, and then obviously years later, was it NU Highlights on YouTube started putting the compilations together with Dave Bennett, you know, calling a lot of those. So it was a game I just cherish. And I grew up on the North Shore. Everybody here is Michigan fans. Like, there are Michigan fans everywhere. I had a bar mitzvah that night with tons of Michigan fans. I was on cloud 9. I'm just walking up to all of them, and I'd pick something up and drop it and be like, oh, I'm Anthony Thomas dropping the ball. I was 13, you know. So it was a game that meant a lot to me, and I actually, at the 2020 Combine, and this was in February, so right before COVID hit, I met Stu Mandel, and at like an athletic happy hour, and I told him, I said, I've always wanted to write about this game. I don't think it's really been Smart Football did like a big expose on it on his website with I'm blanking on his name, Chase, but which was really good. But like, and there have been little things here and there, but like I want to try to do the definitive thing as much as I could, and Stu was like, yeah, like let's touch base. And then COVID hits, and you're starting to think of all these different, you know, things to do. And one of the things our college football people were doing was like a throwback. So Sam, that's my long preamble. I just started, I think I started with Northwestern athletic department, and I had a good relationship with Paul Kennedy, the SID at the time. And I just said, this is what I'm doing. These are the people on staff who I could talk to, and like, can you give me alumni connections? And, you know, so he gave me email, you know, so like Jeff Jenick was awesome for that story. You know, because he was the special teams, you know, so talking about the onside kick with him was great. I already had a relationship with Lou Ianni, so that was obviously pretty easy to get in touch with Lou. And then he gave me email addresses for, I got Zach Kustak's email address, and then I think I found Sam Simmons like through LinkedIn. He was a teacher, and then Damien Anderson might have been a Twitter DM situation. And then for me to get all three of them, their schedules coordinated, and that actually helped that we were all working from home. So maybe it was a little easier to find time to get all three of them on Zoom together was like a thing I'll never forget. Getting to talk to Tammy Walker was really special. Cause again, like I just loved Randy and those teams. And The nice thing was I did all the reporting for that in like May, June, July, and then the story didn't go up until around the anniversary, I believe. So I had a lot of time to like, because there was a lot of transcribing. Holy smokes! And then actually my favorite get and the hardest get. Let me see here. Musburger was actually not that difficult. It took a few emails, but he was great. He's got the incredible memory. The funniest was Lloyd Carr because I ended up cold calling him. I got his number and I just, that's not somebody you can like text and say, hey, here's who I am. I just cold called him.
Shoot your
shot.
Remember,
yeah, exactly. And I remember he was like, you really want to talk about that game? And like,
Man, I'll be honest. I'd cold call Lloyd Carr to ask about that game. I'll do it right now.
And what's funny was Drew Henson was awesome. I remember reaching out to Drew. I got David Terrell's contact. I think we were on the phone for 2 hours, and those are stories that will never see the light of day. That he was telling me that it maybe had nothing to do with that game, but he had great. I mean, he gave me a big like that effing team. I think the first thing he said to me when I was like, I want to talk about 54-21, he goes, that effing game was like the first thing he said, which was great. And Lloyd Carr, we talked for a long time, and then he was like, he kind of got the game confused with another game near the end. And I just kind of let it go. I was very appreciative. We hung up. He calls me back and it's like, wait a second, I want to get this right. And we're going back and forth. I'm like, Lloyd, I went through it. And then he kind of realized that I was right. And he's like, oh yeah, huh, fine. And just like hung up. He was so not only did he have to relive this like painful loss, and I proved him wrong on some like little factoid. Sean Weber, he's a lawyer, just found his like contact, and then trying to think if there was anybody. I did reach out to Anthony Thomas. I did try. Wasn't able to, understandably, and he doesn't do a whole lot of media anyways. Trying to think if there was anybody. I've gotten to know Cody Keenan a little bit. Just he's a huge Bears fan, former Obama speechwriter who was at Northwestern at the time, and like he had told me before a really fun story about like, I think like a friend of his was like on the goalpost and like got in trouble because it was on the daily cover and he was actually supposed to be somewhere else that day or something. I don't remember it exactly, but so yeah,
I was
just
on
being
those
able to
goalposts.
getting all those together, and then getting Rittenberg to get kind of he was in the press box for a bunch of those games to get kind of that side of it. And then I had forgotten that Tom Waddle was the color commentator on GN for that game. I think Ted Albrecht was out that week. And so Tom Waddle, who I've gotten to know, and obviously Dave Ennett helped connect me to Tammy Walker, which I'll always appreciate that he did that. But yeah, my goal was to just get as many voices as possible, and as I've just spent the last 5 minutes running through all of them, I think I succeeded. Like, would it have been great to add in Teddy Johnson and Dwayne Missouri? It was Raheem Covington who recovered the fumble.
He recovered the fumble, yeah.
To try to really get everybody, yeah. But I think I did a pretty good job getting as many voices in there as possible. And that the last thing I'll say in this was before word counts came in the Athletic. So I was able to just go. Like that thing might have been like 5,000 words. And I actually do believe for oral histories you can do that because it is easy to read in that format. Like I wouldn't recommend just writing a 5,000 word recap of a game, but in that way, like I would not be allowed to write that for the Athletic today. I can promise you that. It would have to be half as long.
Well, you can't in that particular oral history, though. You can't write that without providing, which is again talking about like time capsules, without providing all the necessary context for the install of the offense and everything.
Oh well, Kevin Wilson, Kevin Wilson was great. He was so excited to talk about that team and that game. He was awesome.
That's his Sistine Chapel. I'm sure he's It's funny. One hilarious piece. I think one of the single funniest things. A couple of them were funny. The Michigan guys to me is just that's the cherry on the sundae. Henson and Terrell being like, we could do anything we wanted in that game at any time, and we lost. And I was just like, that's hilarious. But then one of the pieces, it could not be more Big Ten that it's basically like Randy Walker didn't want to install this offense to begin with, and Lloyd Carr had 2 full weeks to prepare for it. And then on tape, it looks like they didn't do anything. And then he complained about it afterwards. And I'm just like, it's just so classic Big Ten. But we always talk about that game from very much like, it's almost like a before and after of like eras of college football. Like you can watch Michigan's out there in like a base 4-3 with linebackers with thick shoulder pads and neck rolls trying to defend a spread. And it just doesn't, it's wild to look at that way. Just the
just to chime in, so you, Kevin, you referenced Smart Football. The author Chris Brown makes that exact point, that game separated into before and after. Bill Connolly has said the same things in his write-ups about that game. I mean, it really transformed college offense and showed what an underdog could do. I think what is so compelling to me about it, and Kevin, you alluded to it, I'm so excited that you did, because this is the thing that I really want to get at, and we probably need to save it for another day because we've already been occupying a lot of your time tonight. But your memories of the rest of the season, because while 54-51 was the absolute poster child for what Northwestern achieved that year, Northwestern had never seen anything like this before, and of course we had 1995. That was shocking. We were winning games. We were beating teams we shouldn't beat. We beat Notre Dame 17-15,
right,
and we're putting up 50 points in games against Big Ten brethren. Number 6 Wisconsin.
I always say the Michigan game is the third most exciting game I watched that season.
I like it was. Well, I mean, we put up. We beat Michigan State something like 34-17. We put up 60 on Illinois.
Yeah, that's the one I always remember too. Was like the punctuation mark to the season was 60 on Illinois. But we did talk before we turned on. It's funny, Sam. You mentioned that you were in Las Vegas. I was at a Las Vegas bowling alley for the Iowa game, and there was a tiny I was there on a family vacation. I had family out there, and that weekend we went, and I remember my dad making sure that they had one TV. And, this is 2000. It wasn't that easy for I guess in Vegas it probably was a little bit easier, but still at the bar of a bowling alley in Vegas, this tiny TV, and I was devastated. I mean, that was
Scuzz
it's probably a good thing I didn't actually watch that game. I was like,
I think Scuzz and I were both on the field, equally devastated.
So I think I remember watching. Do we play Duke non-con that year, early in the season?
Probably. I mean, we always play Duke non-con.
I think we did, and it was on the road, but it wasn't televised. Not in any way that any of us could watch it in Evanston. I remember being at the old Orrington Hotel in the bar area, watching that game because it was the only way that we could see it. But it was such a wild season. That game is just the perfect encapsulation of all of it. But I guess the one thing I'm curious about, how do your 13-year-old memories stack up to what you heard in all those interviews?
Oh, it was nice to reaffirm that what meant so much to 13-year-old me, was this and 13-year-old me didn't understand the footballness of the moment, right? I knew what a spread offense was, but I didn't realize this revolution. That was the great nugget that Zach Kustok passed along, that he met Peyton Manning at a football camp, and Peyton Manning was we were all at our hotel on Saturday night watching this game. We were all glued to this. Urban Meyers talked about it a lot too, with it. So yeah. And actually, I still have it. I don't know the last time. I actually do know the last time I wore it. So this was in the era that you couldn't get names. You didn't get jerseys with names on it, right? I had a friend of mine bought me a 20 jersey, but went to a local print shop and got D. Anderson put on the back. Nice. I wore that thing. So he got it for me probably in 2000. I wore it to the Big Ten championship in 2018. So that would have been 18 years later. Yeah. So I that's might be the last time I wore that jersey. But yeah, I mean, it's like, it's funny because whenever I'll run into Lou Ianni at the combine, and I'll always joke with him like, Lou, do your Broncos running backs know about the kickoff return you had in that game that set this up, and you throw the tape on for them and tell them how important that was. It's so cool to see, like, me just as a fan, what that meant, and then to hear from all these people, like, that was just like such an incredible moment for so many people's careers. And like, it's also how classic Northwestern is it that Sean Weber's this like big shot lawyer.
Yeah, he's a partner in a law firm.
Yeah, and he had like the strip of the century at Northwestern, which is really cool.
Yeah, I think of Sean Weber. I think we're the same class. Scuzz and I, and so many of those, DA and so many of those guys, the same class. I think of Sean Weber as like freshman year Sergeant Hall. Like, that's like, and then 2 years later, he had the
that's for me. That's Mike Kafka. Mike and I were the same year.
Oh yeah.
And now here he is the Lions, on the Lions staff, and like I remember like seeing him in the fraternity quad freshman year on Halloween, and this was after because remember he came in that year and like ran for 100 yards against Nevada in a very annoying loss in Reno that year. And like that was like the little glimpse we got of crazy legs Kafka until we saw the rest in Minnesota a couple years later. But yeah, for me, it's always like whenever I like see him, I'm like, wow, that guy was my year. Now he's could be a head coach one day, which is pretty cool.
Well, I mean, we could keep talking forever, and like this has been awesome. And
Yeah.
like I hate to push pause on this, but Kevin, we definitely want to get you back, and continue this conversation another time. Real quick before we go, I was sort of been spinning in the back of my head. I'm wondering if you see any parallels, or how can you compare and contrast the building of the new Ryan Field with the absolute cluster going on with what the Bears are trying to do with the new stadium there.
Oh. What is the most polite way to say this?
We didn't ask if we could bring this topic up before we got on the board.
No, it's fine. I'm very
I should
open
mention
about what
it comes up a couple of times. I'm an Arlington Heights resident, so fold that into whatever.
I mean, Pat Ryan, like, Pat, you're a minority owner. Just tell them how to get it done. Look I mean, you just built a stadium among, like, in the middle of the most angry residents on the planet. And you got it done. And it really wasn't that hard. There were a couple, stories about, residents upset here and there. And as I always say, don't buy a house next to a football stadium if you're worried that football stadium might get bigger and have more events. But I just almost like, Pat's got to be sitting here being like, you guys can't like look at this beautiful stadium that we're about to have, and you guys can't get your stuff done. So I don't know. As we're recording, I'm actually I'm going on paternity leave a couple weeks after the draft, and my hope is it gets done while I'm on leave, selfishly, so I can be like,
pass it off.
I've written so many stories about the Athletic. Beautiful baby girl was born a month and a half ago.
Congratulations.
So I was able to take leave, come back for the draft, and then I'm going to go back on leave. And I'm like, yeah, maybe they can get that done.
Do you already have 7 stories pre-written? Bears open stadium in Indiana, Bears open stadium in Arlington Heights, Bears move to Canada. I mean, like the possibilities are endless.
Well, it's funny because we got pinged when Schefter had this tweet a couple of weeks ago where he said, like, the Bears are hoping to get a decision done in a few weeks, and like our editors are, people who might not be as in tune to what's going on, they're like pinging us, being like, "What should we do?" We're like, "No,
nothing.
We're not writing anything off this tweet. This is nothing. This is just somebody is probably just telling him to tweet this so that we can get some leverage." I've learned a lot about politicking. I've learned a lot about leverage. I've learned a lot about egress and whatever, all the other words when it comes to building things that I didn't need to know. I just want to just put a shovel in the ground somewhere, please. But yeah, I will. I mean, the deal will be done by the time Northwestern season opens. But if it's not, I will have a very snarky tweet or blue sky post from beautiful new Ryan Field, and I will gladly mock the Bears for still not having their stuff together. But by a side note, I am very, very excited for that stadium.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, us as well.
I was gonna say, like, you gotta come by our tailgate at some point.
I know. Again, I hate to keep blaming my children, but I get to games at like kickoff now, pretty much, and so like or sometimes my dad and I have enough time to sit and have a beer together, But one of these days, he and I, and my dad listens to your guys' show as well. He's a diehard Cats fan, so nice. Shout out Dad, because I know he got to the end of this podcast. So
nice.
That's awesome.
I was gonna say I feel like this paternity leave all sounds good on paper, but I can just fast forward and be like, there's just this unchanged diaper while you're like, hang on, I'm just hammering out this Victory Right oral history. I just got one more. Kunle Patrick's telling me about how he knocked it right into Sam Simmons' hands.
The volleyball player, Kunle Patrick. No, I'll be on my phone watching, women's lacrosse Final Four, holding baby in one arm. I have been able to get my boys out to softball games. I'm excited for when they come back closer to home, to get them back there. But it's very excited for the new stadium. And to circle back, I'm excited that we're going to get to hear Northwestern University this weekend at the NFL draft. It's a huge testament to the program. And John, you mentioned it too. Like, I think NFL teams realize they can't inflate guys because they stayed at one school anymore. You just have to accept the reality. You can't ding a guy for transferring 4 times. But I think you could look at a Caleb Tiernan and be like, wow, this is really cool that this guy stuck out, especially when you consider, as you mentioned, all the things he went through. Yep. Same thing for Aiden Hubbard. And I think the coolest thing about Tiernan is, like, from what I heard, and you guys probably heard the same, he was like adamant. He goes, I am playing this bowl game. I am practicing for this bowl game, and I am playing in this bowl game. And I think NFL teams will love hearing that about him.
Well, Kevin Fishbain, thank you again so much for taking the time. We will definitely get you back on, because I feel like there's a lot more we can talk about, and that'd be awesome. But thank you so much for coming on. We really, really appreciate it.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
If you or a loved one is seriously injured by someone else's negligence, hire Kent Simpson of the Simpson Law Group. After over a decade prosecuting murder cases in Chicago, Simpson opened his own firm focused on wrongful death and personal injury cases. He specializes in car, truck, motorcycle, boat, and other transportation accidents, as well as construction accidents, medical negligence, slip and falls, product liability, and more. Millions recovered for clients. No fee unless he wins. The Simpson Law Group. Compassion, empathy, and vigorous advocacy. Go to simpsonlawgroup.com or call 312-332-2107 for a free consultation. And go Cats. Once again, Kevin Fishbain, senior writer for The Athletic, covering the Bears. Incredible conversation. Thank you so much for coming
stories.
on. Awesome stories.
Great stories.
Can't wait to get him back.
And speaking of great stories, all of you go right now. Just go onto YouTube, Breaking In with Kevin Fishbain. You will be, we kind of touched on it, you'll be blown away by the list of people he has had on. I mean, I can only imagine where it's going to go from here, because if you look at the list of big names that he has talking about the great moments in their career, and the moments, like, again, the breakthrough moments, the moments early on, the stories you haven't heard, it's incredible. Like, I mean, you'll just pick a big name and dive in. Like, it's fantastic.
Well, I would say, like, it's not even about the big names. It's like,
no, I mean,
whatever your favorite sport is, whatever you like to follow, like, there's something super relevant for you on his pod, and I would start there, and then you can dig as deep as you want.
Once again, our live draft pod coming up on Thursday for the NFL draft. Tune in. It's going to be fun. And
did you make it? Did you make it to hour 40, whatever this is in this pod? Well, you're welcome, and we want to see you in the chat on Thursday. Yeah. Get in the chat.
Friday's a day off work, y'all. That's how this thing rolls.
I wish it was for me.
Well,
but the Broncos don't have a pick, so I can just chill. I can kick back. I can relax. I can watch some Jalen Waddle tape and go from there. That'll be good times. So we'll go ahead and leave it there for tonight. Head to our website, westlawpirates.com, where you can leave comments and questions. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube, at Westlaw Pirates. And you can always email us, westlawpirates@gmail.com. Tune in next time as we give our visceral and statistical views on Northwestern athletics, and look for us in the west side of Ryan Field flying the red pirate flag, because we give no quarter, especially the fourth. For John Lacombe and Eric Skasby, I'm Sam Walter. Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you next time.